Yeah, part of the reason why I titled this was a lot of people were coming to me kind of in secret about issues they were having and talking about race. I think it's impossible to pretend like race is not something we need to be talking about in 2018. Even if you wanted to avoid it, you couldn't. But I found that there's a lot of fear overtaking people when they are trying to have this conversation. I was getting emails where people would make up fake email accounts to ask me questions about terms they didn't know, because I think a lot of people feel like in this day and age, you should have it all down. You should know what everything means, you should know how to forge ahead. But this is probably one of the most difficult conversations you can have in public life. So I really wanted to start this book for people who are coming with good intentions. They would like to talk about these things. Maybe they're afraid to, maybe they're a little exhausted, a little weary from these things not having gone as well as they had in the past, but they still want to. And I'm hoping to give people tools to make them a little braver, a little better prepared, and increase chances of success in those conversations. I think that we talk past each other a lot, and I think a lot is being said. But I think it's important to remember the power in words and the words that we choose. Part of the reason why I wrote this book was because I feel like people have been disempowered by not being given the words to express what is happening in this country. So we know something's wrong. We have a very, very easy to see sense that something is wrong. But oftentimes we don't have the words for it. And when there is an absence of words for it, other people, wily people, will come and make up words. They will tell you, oh, this is what it is. It's something completely different. And there's a lot of power in that. I think it's no coincidence that we're just now getting to the point where our major news stations are willing to say that our president might just be racist. It took this much. But what he's been saying since he first started running has always been blatantly bigoted in many different ways. But because we don't give people the power to recognize these patterns and to call them what they are, things can get really far in very disturbing directions before we can finally say, whoa, 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 this is too much. But it was too much a long time ago. And I'm hoping to give people, especially those who are at the front lines of this, who are in the crosshairs of this sort of hatred and oppression, the words to be able to say what's happening, and give other people the skills to be able to hear what they're saying. And I think that the reason why this conversation has been so difficult, why we can say so much about this and yet still feel like we're not saying anything, is by design. Because when you call these things what they are, people don't want to participate in them. I don't know very many people where when you call systemic oppression and racism and xenophobia what it is, that people say, sign me up, I want to be aligned with that. But when you can call it other things, and when other people don't have the tools to be able to redirect that and say, no, this is what it is, then it becomes very easy for countless people to sign up for it, to kind of give into their worst natures where it may benefit them. And that's kind of how we find ourselves in the situation we're in today. I honestly think that so much of what he had said in his day still stands and still resonates. I think there's a reason why, when so many people talk about Dr. King, they only remember a man with a dream, because that was, to many people, the most palatable part of anything he said, even if misinterpreted by many. But, he was talking about, the lack of will amongst, say, white moderates who prefer, this false peace, this unease of peace where people are being oppressed but are a little quieter about it, over, the disruption of justice. That is just as needed today, that conversation, when you look at how people respond to, like, Black Lives Matter, a group that is just marching down the street and saying we matter, but doing the really uncomfortable and to many threatening work of saying, this is what you're doing to us, this is what your society is doing to us, right? Just as that was a threat when Dr. King was marching in the streets, it's a threat when our young people are marching in the streets today. And I think the way in which he was addressing that, and I grieve his early passing, because I think that he was doing some of his best work on that before he was killed. I think that not enough people have heard that and should, and taken it to heart. It's always amazing to me, even in preparing for this speech, going back through some of his old writings and speeches and just seeing, how much of it I kept stopping my children and reading to them, and they're like, "Oh, Mom," but I was like, "No, you have to hear this again." They're like, "But you do this every Martin Luther King Day. You do this like any other time." I'm like, "But it will never stop being necessary." And I think that, a lot of people ask what he would say today. I think he would update. I think he would open up who he was talking about. He was always someone who was willing to reevaluate and modernize, even in the few short years we had with him, to encompass more people in his scope as he saw different levels of oppression. And I think it would be a much broader scope today. But I think that his speeches, I think he would be very frustrated at having to make the same speeches today, but he probably would. I fear for their safety, both their emotional and physical safety. I think that most Black parents and parents of color do. I fear for their sense of hope. Watching my 10-year-old was obsessed with this last election, really wanted to know what was happening. He was, I think, wasn't even a year old when Obama was elected. So his entire life, he's had a Black president. And to watch this election and watch the adults that he's been told to trust turn so far towards hatred and bigotry, it really made him feel unsafe. And it was very hard for him to look at the world, as a place that he wanted to grow up into. And I fear for that in our children, and so many young children of color, particularly young Black and Indigenous children, are having their faith in their potential and in their future robbed by systems that really start criminalizing them and harming them at very young ages. So, I fight to have children that are prepared for the world, but also children that still, have that sense of wonder and hope that our children have, because you can't give a child back their childhood. I think it is really important for people to recognize how much power there is in anger. But that power only lies if you can recognize where it's from, what feeds it, where the heart of your anger lies. We live in a society that tells us that we shouldn't be angry, and it especially tells the most disempowered of us that we shouldn't be angry. I think it's kind of ironic that we've spent the last year and a half talking about why are all of these white men so angry. They are allowed to be angry. We can write multiple op-eds dissecting all of their anger. But people of color are not allowed to be angry when they're marching to protest the murders of their kin. Indigenous people are not allowed to be angry when they see pipelines being built through their land. It's a use of power and abuse of power. And what happens is you grow up being told all of the time that it's a weakness to be angry, that you fail if you're angry. But you cannot will away anger. And what happens then is the anger sits in you unclaimed, and you become so distant from it. And anyone who has the lack of morals, but perhaps the intelligence too, will come along and say, I know what your anger is, and I know what's causing it, it's this. And they say, this is the healthy place to put your anger, this is where it should go. And then you are filled with relief and you pour your anger out. And that's how we pour our anger out in our elections and end up voting for people who not only work against our own best interests, but violate all of our closely held principles. Because someone said, oh, you're so angry. This is why you're angry. You're angry because of immigrants. You're angry because of people of color. You're angry because of all of these things. Take it, run. But our deepest angers usually come from our deepest loves. The things that we love, when those are threatened, when those are harmed, if we can connect back to that, then we will never lose our way in our fight. I am so angry because I love my community, because I love my children, because I love my Blackness, because I love Black children, because I love the potential of Black people. And I am so angry at how often that is abused and threatened. And so long as I remember that's why I'm angry, then I know where my fight lies. My fight lies in the system that harms that. that threatens them. My anger doesn't just wander wild, it becomes focused, and the stakes become real, and it becomes nourishing instead of devastating. And I think that we have to remember that there is great power in knowing why we're angry and owning that, and not backing down from it when we recognize that anger comes from love.